Hey, I wanted to make this video for a while now. So I watched a Neil Degrass Tyson video, I think yesterday, right? And he had a weird premise about how the dimensions work and how they operate. I wanted to kind of clarify my hypothesis on dimensions past the third dimension and what dimensions are exactly, because I have a hypothesis, and I've been wanting to kind of get this off for a while and see what people think. Right? First dimension, right? First dimension is basically like a plane, right? So it's like a piece of paper. It's like a flat piece of paper, right? Now there's only going one axis, right? Ignore this piece. There's only one axis here, so you can only go back and forth. That's the first dimension, right? Two dimensions would be like a piece of paper that's kind of folded up like this. Obviously, it's running this way, and it's running up, correct? So that's two dimensions. Very easy. You know, you have a y and you have an x. That's two dimensions. Now, when you're in two dimensions, by the way, when you look down at a one-dimensional plane or a one-dimensional figure, it's gonna seem, you know, like a point, like a non-existent kind of thing. It's really just gonna be a point, because you can't really. I don't think there's a way that two-dimensional figures could really see one dimension. It would be like a flat plane, so, or like a little point or whatever, right? So one dimension doesn't even really exist technically, but it's just worth noting a plane. Two dimensions being you have the y and then the x, right? Now, when you get to three dimensions, that's the dimensional dimension that we're in right now, right? That's where you can start to see two dimensions as a plane. So it's kind of like when you're in the second dimension, you see one dimension as just like a dot. When you're in the third dimension, you see the second dimension as basically like a flat plane. So it's kind of like inverse, you know, as you start coming out, you start to see what the previous dimension kind of saw of the previous dimension. Does that make sense? Okay, follow me here, because then it gets weirder. It gets way weirder. And I think the past the third dimension is what people don't understand. So as three-dimensional beings, right? Because in three dimensions, now we're actual beings to a degree, because there is no life form or anything that is in the second dimension or even in the first dimension. It just doesn't exist, because everything, the fundamentals of life, works on the third dimension, right? So in the third dimension, that is when you start seeing second dimensional objects as, you know, as planes. So think about a TV. When you're looking at that, you're only seeing a flat plane. You're seeing an image representation of something that's 3D. Or in this case, also like cartoons or whatever, would be actual 2D. So it'd be an actual representation of the second dimension versus, you know, seeing 3D and 2D, but it's you understand? Okay. Anyways, we'll skip. That's three dimensions. So we're in the third dimension. Everything is 3D. We have the X, we have the Y, and then we have the Z. Okay? Follow me, because this is when it starts getting weird, and this is where people start to mess up with everything. But it also, I feel like a lot of people, like, this is where it also starts getting weird, right? So when you enter, my theory, by the way, is every third dimension, I take this from Nikola Tesla, 369 is the key to the universe. Now, why did he say it like that? Obviously, he dealt with energy, he dealt with electricity, stuff like that. Now, I have a theory where 3, 6, and 9 are the dimensions, and it stands ground that in the third dimension, that's where physical life is, right? That's how we flourish. That is how we operate. We operate in the third dimension. When you get to the sixth dimension, which I'll explain, when you get to the sixth dimension, there's a different atmosphere, a different being that you transcend, that you become in the sixth dimension. Same with the ninth dimension. You become something completely different. And I think that's where the border between science and spirituality really That's where it starts to blend, where it starts to merge, because thinking just scientifically about all this stuff, like Neil Degrass Tyson said, in the fourth dimension, you'll be able to see things in the third dimension differently. No, in the fourth dimension, now we're getting to the fourth dimension. In the fourth dimension, it's interesting because that's where you cross the boundary of starting to transcend into something different. You're not there yet, so you're still human in a sense, but that's where things start to happen. And my theory is, when you cross into the fourth dimension, how does that happen? How does that happen? Because that's not something that's going to happen in our third dimensional selves, right? Our body is a third dimensional being. We are trapped in the third dimension, right? You have to think about it like that. We as physical beings are trapped in the third dimension, okay? There's no transcending to the fourth. It's not going to magically happen. We don't evolve to the fourth dimension. What happens is we die, and our soul, or our presence, our you can't even say physical matter, because again, you can't put the terminology of science into this, because now it starts to blend into spirituality, right? But there is some science that backs this up, right? So when you cross into the fourth dimension, how does that happen? That happens when you die, because when you die, now you don't have a physical form, you have a spiritual form. And your spirit, your body, your essence, your soul, however you want to talk about it, transcends. You become a new being. How does this happen? Because when people have near-death experiences, when they see angels, when they see phenomenon of the spiritual and like paranormal, all that has to deal with spiritual energy, spiritual presences, things that you can't normally see in the third dimension. We can't see a spiritual form normally, right? We see it as a cloud. We see it as because our brains cannot comprehend, at least to a degree, cannot comprehend what that looks like, what that is, right? And in the fourth dimension, you become energy. You become spiritual, like a spiritual presence. But a lot of people say that once you cross over, you kind of look back at your life, right? Like a timeline, right? This is where science comes in, right? A lot of people say that in the fourth dimension, you add time. So instead of it just being planar, like planes, right? So you have the X, the Y, and the Z. Now you add time. Now this is where it becomes interesting, because now everything molds together. You have spirituality, science, and everything kind of coming together. So I want you to think, for the people who have watched Interstellar, I want you to think back about that Interstellar scene where basically you have, I forget the names of the characters, but you have the main guy. He's basically McConaughey, or Matthew McConaughey, right? I know his actor name. You have him floating above this big presence of just a time loop, right? And he's able to sort through and go back. Everything's happening at once, by the way. All the times of existence of his life are shown all in like one time stream, and he can pick and choose where he wants to go. And he might be able to even interact in a sense, but he doesn't have full control of how he operates. He can only communicate in such ways back in time, back and forth in time. And so the interesting thing here is that I feel like that concept was very literal to what I'm talking about, because when you add the time element and you take in accounts of people having near death experiences, or even experiences beyond life, you get a lot of the same stuff. I was able to see my entire life and it all in front of me, or I was able to see light. I was able to see this. I was able to see that. I believe, this is my hypothesis, that time does play. When you become a fourth dimensional being of sorts, or you're transcending through that to get to the sixth dimension, you are transcending into a new atmosphere where now you are looking at your life and you are being judged. And this also has ties with spiritual or religion as well, depending on what you believe in. This is 3 different concepts that are all being blended together, because I feel like that you cannot just look at one and say, okay, science says this, but you can't explain it. There's no way to explain it unless you die and you're you're somehow able to basically come back to life and recall your experiences. It just doesn't work that way. It's very hard for a fourth dimensional being to come back to a third dimensional being and recount all that stuff, unless there is proof of reincarnation. Then I think that's a little different. And I think there's always, small little things that could happen. Yeah, you could be reincarnated or whatever, but I think that this is generally the path of transcendence, right? And it also has to do with vibrations as well. I feel like spirituality, vibrations, all that stuff kind of harmonizes to the same thing. You transcend after you die. Your physical body is no more. You are a soul. You are a spiritual presence. You are shown your life as a timeline, and you are able to go back and forth and choose and see what you've done. And you are judged once you complete a mission, whatever that mission is, whether you have to stay on Earth, hell on Earth, so you are trapped on Earth in a spiritual form, watching everyone do their own thing, or there might be an actual hell. I don't know, right? I'm a third dimensional being, by the way. But imagine hell is hell on Earth. You are a spiritual being trapped here. And until you complete your mission, you are staying on Earth. There is no transcending, right? The goal is to transcend. But if you cannot find in your life, in your timeline, where you may be fucked up, or I don't know how the judging process works, right? I'm just imagining that if there was a judging process, right? And this is the process to get to the 5th dimension, to be enlightened, per se, that you would be able to look at your life from a span and try to figure out, or be judged on how that went in some sort of way or whatnot to get to the 5th dimension. So once you become enlightened, right? Once you are, let's say, once you have found your mission and you have completed your mission, you are no longer in purgatory or in between. In between would be looking at your life, right? If you fail that's when you go down to Earth. So let's just say as a spiritual being, so that's basically hell, right? If you're in purgatory, if you're in like the middle thing, that's when you're looking at your life. If you can't figure it out, then hell or Earth. If you do figure it out, you go to the next step, which is the 5th dimension. That is when you're enlightened even more. A lot of people past death or even near death experiences, they say they have a particular phrase, right? They say, hey, I'm trying to find the light. I am trying to I'm trying to complete my mission. I'm trying to do this and that, but there's always some kind of phrase in there that talks about light. I'm trying to be enlightened. I'm trying to find the light. And I always kind of like resonated with that, because I was like, what are they trying to find? What are they trying to achieve? And I feel like the 5th dimension is finding the light. That would be heaven, right? That would be a sense of heaven. That is when their energies transcend to heaven. And based off of that, I'm not sure if heaven is just kind of like that area where a lot of people just kind of chill out and it's like, okay, I'm good with this. Because if you think about the 6th dimension, and the 5th dimension would be like, so there's the time element in the 4th dimension. The 5th dimension would be like creating your own world, your own reality, right? And a lot of people would be very happy with that, like creating your own reality. And that's why they call it heaven, because you can now, you get the ability to create whatever you want, right? If you wanted, this person to be there, boom, they're there. Or if you wanted to enjoy life like you had it on Earth and basically visualize whatever, you can create whatever the fuck you want. And I believe that that's the time element upgraded from the 4th dimension, right? Because you didn't have control. And now actually, I believe maybe in the 5th dimension there would probably be like you have control. No, fifth dimension, you're able to create stuff. I believe that you would be able to create stuff because when you're in heaven, you have that ability. I feel like that would be the case, right? So let's just put it there. All of this is just theory, by the way. After the third dimension, I have no clue if any of this is correct. But I'm putting the puzzle pieces together to maybe have somebody say, hey, actually that sounds kind of correct. I mean, it sounds like it should happen that way, right? Now, when you transcend to the sixth dimension, I think that there would be an option there, right? Kind of like how when you went from the third to the fourth, I think from the fifth to the sixth, there would be an option. Because if you're already in heaven and you're able to create whatever the fuck you want, why the hell would you go to do something else? And I think the sixth dimension, I'm not going to talk about anything after that because I feel like it gets into crazier stuff, but I got the theory for from the third to the sixth. I think in the sixth dimension, you would be able to create your own universe in a sense. Now, imagine that. Think about that for a second. You would be able to, so rewind the clock, right? You're in the fifth dimension. You get the opportunity to maybe upgrade, go to become a different being, right? And I think this is where a lot of people kind of get lost because I feel like you have the power to be a different being if you wanted to. Like, let's say, okay, you can create your own world, but you're trapped to your world. That's the fifth dimension. You kind of trapped, but you're an omnipotent being. Now, let's say that when you transcend and become the sixth, you go to the sixth dimension, now you're a sixth dimensional being. Now you have the power to create your own universes. And I feel like that's a whole different thing, but think about it for a second. Think about it logically. In the fifth dimension, you're not really a god. I mean, you're a god for Earth or like whatever, world you end up creating, but you're not like a god of like a universe in a sense. Like you're pretty much in the fifth dimension, you're pretty much like an omnipotent being to a sense. Like you can create, you want water, you can do this, but you're still trapped. You can't create worlds or whatever. You still have all these people that can do the same thing that you can, right? But as a sixth dimensional being, now you're by yourself and you can create whatever you want. You can create worlds, you can create universes, you can do whatever you want. And I think that this is interesting because it really makes sixth dimensional beings are really just gods. Whereas fifth dimensional beings would be like demigods, something like that, like semi-gods. Like you have all these other gods that are with you, that are part of your thing. Think about it like angels maybe. So like fifth dimension would be angels, whereas sixth dimension would be God, like actual God. And you have your own universe. Like think about it like, what's a good example I can give you guys? Think about it like this. Fifth dimension, you're able to create your own room, right? You have your own room in a school or like a hotel or something. And you can create anything you want in that room. Anything you want in the room and only in the room. Once you're out the room, well, now you have all these other people that are doing the same thing in their own room. Like they can do whatever the fuck they want, right? They can create stuff, they can do, but you're still trapped in the hotel, right? You're still trapped in this big hotel that is controlled by a higher being, the sixth dimensional being, right? Now, and you can make your own fifth dimension, sixth dimension, all that stuff. So I think in the sixth dimension, you can actually scale up the dimensions once again. So it's like a trickle up effect. You have your own pathway to your own sixth dimension, almost like a pyramid scheme of sense, right? But think about it like this. And so the hotel isn't owned by you, but you have control in the room and only in the room. In the sixth dimension, you have control of the entire hotel, and everyone in the hotel is basically yours. So they also have control of their own rooms, but now you're the guy owning the hotel. Does that make sense? So basically the same thing, it's the same concept. Sixth dimension, you own the hotel. Fifth dimension, you own only the room in the hotel. Fourth dimension, you're basically looking at the hotel map. You're looking at the map of the hotel. And you're being judged whether you can actually go into the hotel or not. If you can't go into the hotel, well, you're staying on the street, right? Us in the third dimension, we're on the street. We are on the street, you know? I guess the fourth dimension would be you're on the street, but you're on the sidewalk. You're not on the street. You're on the sidewalk, right? You're figuring out whether you want to be on the street or you want to go into the hotel. Does that make sense? Fifth dimension. Okay, so look. Third, you're on the street. Fourth, you're on the sidewalk, deciding whether you want to be on the street or go to the hotel. Fifth, you're in the hotel, you own your room, and you can do whatever the fuck you want in your room. The sixth dimension would be you own the hotel. Hopefully that's a really simplified way of thinking of the first dimension to the sixth dimension. Obviously, the first two dimensions don't really matter. Second dimension only matters in the context of the third dimension, because that's what we're looking at. It's an image, a projection of sense, and the third dimension is the reality that we exist in. Okay, but once you go beyond that, you cannot say fourth dimensional beings, because it doesn't work that way. There is no such thing as fourth dimensional beings. There isn't. There's no such thing as fifth dimensional beings. There isn't. Because when you get past the third dimension, there is no more matter, right? Matter doesn't exist. It's all spiritual energy at that point. It's all energy and vibrations, okay? That is all we are. And so yes, a third dimensional being can possibly see a fourth dimensional being. It's been shown. Mediums, stuff like that, they can cross over. They have a sense, something's turned on in their mind, and to enable themselves to see or communicate or be in between, right? They aren't on the road, but they also aren't on the sidewalk. They are right smack on the curb, and they can see, both sides now. You're in between. You're in the middle of all that, And I think that's the part. This is the part where people just mess it up and try to think about, just think about it logically, right? But don't separate science from spirituality, from testimonials in the paranormal, because I think that I would believe that they're all together. And a lot of times, a lot of people are like, oh, but to have that hypothesis, you need to be able to prove it and prove it. You can't prove this stuff. You can't, there's no way. You can only go off the evidence, which is circumstantial, right? But you can only go off the evidence that is presented. And there's not ever going to be a case, again, I don't know this, but generally, I would assume that there's not going to be a case where where we transcend to a fourth dimension just naturally or through evolution, because it doesn't work that way. It has never worked that way. Okay, there has never been a case in religious text of that. There's never been cases of anything like that, right? Unless we evolve to a certain point where we become, but even if we evolve, the cool thing about this is that even if we evolve, we get telekinesis or some bullshit, we fly to the moon and back, 2,000 years past, 20 million years past, we're still physical beings. It doesn't matter how much we evolve, how much we do, we are still physical beings at the end of the day, and we are still trapped in the third dimension, which is the entire universe. So it all makes sense, right? Because even if there are higher powers at play that, let's say that made us, you can think about God as well, but I'm saying just in general, scientifically, if you had to say that God was like an alien, for example, and hopefully you don't get mad at that. I'm doing theoreticals, okay? But I'm saying even if you thought that God was an alien or the Anunnaki, which is a theory again, and they came here, they spliced our DNA, they were able to make Earth, Earth and all this other bullshit, right? Even if you believe in that, the Anunnaki, as advanced as they would be, being aliens or higher powers of a sense, would still be dimensionally trapped in the third dimension. There would be no transcending, because even they would be trapped to the third dimension. So they would still have physical bodies. It's only until you don't have a physical body that you would go or transcend to the fourth dimension. And this excludes like going to virtual reality or something like that. It excludes that because it's totally different. Still trapped in the third dimension regardless, but technically at that point you'd be trapped in the second dimension. You'd be regressing, right? Because you'd be basically a player on the screen, right? And you wouldn't be part of this reality. You'd be part of a different reality, which would be the VR. But also, at the same time, you would also, if you like, imagine that if virtual reality came to that degree, you could technically simulate your own sixth dimension, if that makes sense. Because you would already have all the powers you would need to control everything. But the problem there is that it's still not real. It's a fake, it's a simulated sixth dimension. That makes sense? So technically, we can simulate the sixth dimension via virtual reality. The problem is that you're not in control of that, right? Unless you created the game, but even then, the program could still take over. The power could go off in the real world, and I don't know where that would leave you, if you would just die or what would happen, but technically, you would be in a simulated sixth dimension. So that's how I would define virtual reality or virtual worlds, is that you would basically be in a simulated sixth dimension while also being in a 2D dimension or a second dimension at the same time. If it's being like watched on TV or something. If it's just all in your head, then yeah, it would be a simulated sixth dimension. So I can't wait to see what the comments say on this. If you have your own theory, let me know. If you feel like this is somewhat accurate, obviously we can't tell, but if you feel like this is on the path of being somewhat accurate, let me know. And if you have any suggestions on how this theory could also progress and how it works with other things like Nikola Tesla's 369 theory and everything else I've presented, vibrations, spirituality, paranormal phenomenon, religious text, and ancient astronauts theory, all of that stuff combines really nicely with this, which I really like, and it puts everything at scale. You know, there's nothing that seems out of place, at least in my mind, with this concept of spirituality and how you transcend between the dimensions and what that actually means and what that entails. Because it flows nicely with the scientific progress of thinking about how the fourth dimension works. And I think there's even a video showing how you could even get to like a 12th dimension, but I really only think there's only 9 dimensions because you can only go so far with it. I feel like after 6 dimensions, it's really kind of pointless because you're already the creator of your own universes. And I think that works nicely because I also have another theory that's way out there, but I think that black holes aren't really black holes. They are portals from the third dimension to go to another third dimension, right? So you're going from one universe to another universe. And I think that's a multi-world theory, but you're still within the same multi-universe. That makes sense? So imagine infinite universes, right? A box of infinite universes. That box is handled by the sixth dimensional being, okay? So you can have infinite universes and your third dimensional beings can travel between universes. Does that make sense? If they do it right, if they go through a black hole, obviously you have to have enough you have to have enough development with scientific stuff. Obviously going to a black hole is suicide unless you have the right equipment. That's what I believe. You know, I feel like there's multiple universes out there, the many worlds theory, but black holes aren't what they appear to be. I believe that a black hole goes to other universes, whereas a wormhole takes you back in time to a certain point, and there's no deciding what point that is. But within your own universe, it can take you back. It's folding that paper and going through and poking a hole through it and going through. So I believe that it takes you to a different place of point in time and space, but it's still within the same universe. You don't just cross a world line or whatever. You're still in the same universe. That makes sense? Whereas a black hole transcends and goes to a different universe. So hopefully you guys can tell me what you think. That's just my theory time. And I'll catch you guys later. Peace.